The boost that should have killed the engine. March 5, 1943. 21,000 feet above the English Channel. The sea below, a hammered sheet of gray steel. The cold is already biting through wool and leather as Flight Lieutenant Alan Jock Reynolds tightens his grip on the control column of his Supermarine Spitfire Mk9. The Merlin 61 engine ahead of him hums with a familiar, comforting vibration, steady, powerful, obedient. Or at least it should be. The cockpit smells faintly of oil and hot metal. Frost creeps along the canopy edges. Reynolds glances at the boost gauge again, more out of habit than concern. His section is running late, climbing hard to intercept a reported formation of Focke-Wulf 190s crossing the coast near Dieppe. The radio crackles with clipped voices, calm, professional, British calm masking the tension that always comes before contact. Then it happens. As Reynolds pushes the throttle forward to maintain climb rate, the needle on the boost gauge doesn't stop where it should. It keeps moving. Plus 18 pounds per square inch. Plus 19. Plus 20. His stomach tightens. The Merlin engine is not supposed to do that. Standard operating limits are drilled into every RAF fighter pilot from the first day they touch a combat aircraft. Exceed them, and the engine will punish you violently. Pistons can seize. Connecting rods can shear. Superchargers can tear themselves apart. At altitude, engine failure doesn't just mean a forced landing. It means a long, cold fall into the channel. Reynolds eases back slightly, expecting the needle to drop. It doesn't. The engine note deepens instead, turning from a smooth roar into something angrier, more feral. The aircraft surges forward, climbing faster than any Spitfire he has ever flown. His airspeed creeps upward even as the nose remains pitched high. Red 2. You seeing this? He calls over the radio, keeping his voice level. A pause. Then, seeing what, Jock? Reynolds swallows. Never mind. He doesn't have time to explain. Ahead, black specks are forming against the haze. Enemy fighters, sunlight glinting off wings as they turn into the intercept. FW-190s. Experienced pilots. Fast, heavily armed, and usually capable of choosing when to fight and when to disengage. Reynolds knows the reputation. He's felt it before, the frustration of watching German fighters dive away, confident the Spitfire can't quite follow without ripping itself apart. But now, something is different. As the formation levels off, Reynolds pulls the nose down slightly and advances the throttle again, carefully, almost fearfully. The boost gauge needle pushes even higher. The Spitfire lunges forward. The acceleration pins him into the seat. The controls feel tighter, heavier, but alive, responsive in a way that borders on dangerous. The Merlin's supercharger screams as it force-feeds air into the cylinders, delivering power that no manual, no training syllabus has ever promised. For a brief, unsettling moment, Reynolds is convinced he's flying a time bomb. Then the FW-190s begin to turn. One breaks left, rolling hard. Another dives. A third tries to climb away, counting on its usual margin of speed. Reynolds follows instinctively. He pushes the nose down and opens the throttle fully. The Spitfire does not protest. It hunts. The distance closes, slowly at first, then rapidly. The German pilot ahead commits to a shallow dive, expecting to widen the gap. Instead, Reynolds watches the enemy aircraft grow larger in his gun sight. His heart is hammering now, not just from combat stress, but from disbelief. This shouldn't be possible. Not like this. At 300 yards, he squeezes the trigger. The Hispano cannons thud, the airframe shuddering as shells streak forward. The first burst misses. The second walks into the Focke-Wulf's wing root. Metal peels back. Smoke erupts. The German fighter snaps into a violent roll and vanishes downward, trailing debris. Reynolds pulls up hard, half expecting the engine to fail right then and there. It doesn't. The Merlin keeps running, hot, overworked, but gloriously alive. The fight scatters. The Spitfires press harder than usual, staying with the Germans in dives they would normally abandon. Another FW-190 is damaged. One more breaks away early, abandoning the formation entirely. Minutes later, the sky is empty. On the flight back to base, Reynolds finally allows himself to look at the instruments again. Oil temperature is high. Coolant pressure is flirting with danger. The boost gauge still sits well beyond where it should ever be. When he lands at RAF Biggin Hill, ground crews swarm the aircraft, frowning at the readings, at the heat-soaked engine cowling. One mechanic, Corporal Dennis Hale, leans into the cockpit and shakes his head slowly. "Sir," he says, voice tight, "your boost cutout's been disabled." Reynolds blinks. "Disabled how?" Hale hesitates. Looks like someone adjusted it wrong during servicing. A mistake. A simple, human mistake. One that should have destroyed the engine. Instead, it just changed the rules of the fight. The error in the workshop. March 5, 1943. RAF Biggin Hill. The concrete dispersal is slick with melted frost as ground crews circle Reynolds Spitfire, their voices low, serious. Corporal Dennis Hale wipes his hands on an oil rag and looks again at the boost control assembly, frowning deeper each time. The boost cutout is a small thing. A mechanical safeguard designed to protect the Merlin engine from pilots pushing it beyond safe limits. Under normal circumstances, it physically prevents the throttle from delivering excessive manifold pressure. It is not meant to be clever. It is meant to be absolute. And yet, on Reynolds' aircraft, it is wrong. Hale removes a panel and traces the linkage with a practiced finger. Nearby, Flight Sergeant Arthur Miles, senior fitter on the line, crouches beside him. The two men exchange a glance that says everything without words. "It's been shimmed," Miles mutters. "But not to spec." "How far off?" Hale asks. Miles checks again. "Far enough." The explanation is mundane. A rushed overnight service. A replacement part that did not quite match. A fitter compensating by feel instead of regulation, trusting experience instead of paperwork. In peacetime, the error would have been caught in inspection. In wartime Britain, with squadrons flying multiple sorties a day, it slipped through. The result is an engine allowed to generate emergency boost without the usual mechanical restraint. Reynolds stands a few feet away, helmet under his arm, listening as the mechanics speak. He feels oddly detached, like the conversation belongs to someone else. The fight over the channel replays in his mind. The closing distance. The German fighter that could not pull away. "Is it dangerous?" he asks. Miles straightens slowly. "Sir, by the book, yes." "Very." Hale nods. "You push boost like that too long, you risk blowing the engine clean apart." Reynolds exhales. "But it didn't." "No," Hale says. "It didn't." That fact hangs in the air. Word spreads quickly on a fighter station. Before the afternoon is out, pilots from other flights wander over, pretending to check weather reports or cigarette supplies, all of them glancing toward Reynolds' Spitfire. Questions begin quietly, then more openly. "What boost did you see? How did she handle? Did the engine knock? Any detonation?" Reynolds answers honestly. "The aircraft ran hot. The controls were heavier. But in the dive, in the chase, it felt like flying a different machine." Squadron leader Peter Ashcroft, the commanding officer, listens without interrupting. A veteran of France and the Battle of Britain, Ashcroft has seen enough to know when something unusual deserves attention. He summons the engineering officer before evening briefing. The engineering officer arrives with the technical manual under his arm and skepticism written on his face. Regulations exist for a reason. Overboosting engines shortens their life drastically. Pistons erode. Valves burn. Bearings fail without warning. But war is not fought on regulations alone. They examine the aircraft together. Measurements are taken. Notes scribbled. The conclusion is undeniable. Reynolds' Spitfire has been running significantly above rated boost pressure. "How long can it do that?" Ashcroft asks. The engineering officer hesitates. "Minutes. Maybe." "And in those minutes?" Ashcroft presses. The officer exhales. "It would outperform standard settings. Considerably." Ashcroft nods slowly. That night, the squadron mess is louder than usual. The talk is not of rations, or leave, or letters from home. It is of speed. Of dives that can be held longer. Of German fighters no longer able to disengage at will. One pilot jokes about broken engines littering the channel. Another points out that a shot-down enemy is better than a perfectly preserved Merlin. Reynolds sits quietly, turning his glass in his hand. He is not reckless. He knows engines. He knows the cost of mechanical failure. But he also knows what he felt in the air. The next morning, Ashcroft makes a decision. 2 aircraft only. That is the order given to the ground crews. 2 Spitfires will have their boost cutouts adjusted to match Reynolds' accidental configuration. The work will be done carefully, deliberately, measured and logged. Pilots will be briefed explicitly. Use the extra boost only when necessary. Short bursts. No heroics. Officially, nothing has changed. Unofficially, a line has been crossed. The first test flight is done just after noon. The pilot climbs to altitude, reports steadily, calmly. When he opens the throttle, his voice tightens despite himself. It pulls, he says. Bloody hell, it really pulls. Back on the ground, the engineering officer watches oil temperature charts climb and stabilize. High, but not catastrophic. The engine survives the flight. By the end of the week, 4 aircraft carry the modification. By the end of the month, nearly the entire squadron does. No memo authorizes it. No official directive endorses it. But pilots talk. Maintenance crews compare notes. Across fighter command, similar adjustments begin appearing, always unofficial, always quiet. What began as a mistake in a workshop is becoming a habit. And habits, in wartime, spread fast, turning risk into doctrine. April 1943. Northern France lies beneath a thin veil of cloud, broken by sunlight that glints off wings and canopy glass. The Spitfires of Ashcroft's squadron crossed the coast at altitude, climbing into German airspace with practiced discipline. This is no longer an experimental curiosity. The pilots know exactly what they carry under their cowlings. They also know the price. Flight Lieutenant Reynolds feels the vibration through his boots as the Merlin warms. The engine has a different voice now, a sharper edge that reminds him constantly that restraint matters. He keeps his hand light on the throttle, waiting. Ahead, the radio comes alive. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. Multiple shapes form against the sky. BF 109 GS this time, climbing hard, trying to take position above the escorting Spitfires. The German pilots are disciplined. They know altitude is life. Ashcroft's voice cuts through the chatter. Hold boost. Do not engage until ordered. The formation tightens. Reynolds watches the enemy fighters, judging angles, closing speeds. This is the moment where doctrine used to dictate patience. Hold energy. Avoid the vertical fight where the Messerschmitts still have an edge. Then Ashcroft gives the word. Red section. Now. Reynolds advances the throttle past the familiar resistance point. The boost needle swings up and keeps going. The Spitfire surges, climbing into the attack in a way that feels almost wrong. The extra power does not make the aircraft invincible, but it changes the math. The climb rate narrows the gap. The Germans hesitate, just for a heartbeat, recalculating. That heartbeat is enough. The fight fractures into individual duels. Reynolds stays vertical longer than he ever would have dared before, following a Messerschmitt that expects him to stall out beneath it. Instead, the Spitfire keeps coming, engine screaming, propeller clawing at thinning air. At the top of the climb, Reynolds rolls and dives. The German pilot brakes late, surprised. Cannon fire flashes. The BF 109 snaps into a steep spiral, smoke pouring from its engine. Reynolds does not chase. He pulls away immediately, throttling back, respecting the limits hammered into him by the mechanics. Seconds of power, not minutes. Below, the rest of the sky tells the same story. Spitfires staying in the fight longer. Germans disengaging earlier. The balance is subtle but unmistakable. When the squadron returns, the debrief is different from those of months past. The language has changed. Pilots talk about timing. About choosing the moment to use the extra boost. About resisting the temptation to lean on it continuously. The engineering officer lays out his data. Engines are wearing faster. Spark plugs show signs of stress. Oil consumption is up. But catastrophic failures are not occurring at the rate he feared. More importantly, claims are rising. Word filters upward through channels that are not meant to exist. Wing commanders notice improved interception success. Intelligence reports show fewer German fighters lingering over target areas. Luftwaffe pilots begin reporting Allied fighters with unexpectedly strong climb performance. Across the channel, German engineers study wreckage and combat reports, puzzled by aircraft that appear to violate known performance envelopes. Some dismiss it as exaggeration. Others suspect new fuel blends. A few quietly wonder if British engines are being pushed beyond reason. They are right. Back in Britain, the unofficial practice begins to harden into something closer to doctrine. Briefings include a new phrase: emergency boost discipline. Pilots are taught not just how to fight, but when to break their own machines. Training flights simulate the exact conditions under which the extra power should be used. Short climbs. Final pursuit. Escape from disadvantage. Never in cruise. Never casually. Reynolds finds himself briefing younger pilots, repeating lessons he learned the hard way. He emphasizes caution. He also emphasizes reality. You don't use it because you want to, he tells them. You use it because if you don't, you die. By summer, the practice is no longer confined to a single squadron. Variations appear. Some units are more conservative. Others push harder, accepting higher engine losses for greater combat advantage. The Air Ministry remains officially silent. Then, quietly, technical orders begin to change. Language is softened. Limits are redefined. New allowances appear for short duration over boost under combat conditions. Nothing explicitly credits the original mistake. Nothing admits that regulations have followed pilots, not the other way around. Reynolds reads the updated documents one evening and smiles thinly. He knows how this really started, with a misaligned part and a mechanic doing his best under pressure. The skies over Europe grow more crowded, the fighting more intense. The margin for error shrinks every month. And in those shrinking margins, a mistake has become a weapon. When the enemy notices. June 13, 1943, 26,000 feet above the Ruhr Valley. The bomber stream stretches below like a slow-moving river of aluminum, contrails marking its course deep into Germany. Reynolds flies high cover now, older, more experienced, his movements economical. The war has shifted. This is no longer defense. This is pressure. The radio is tense before the first contact even appears. Bandits forming high 12 o'clock. Large group. Reynolds scans upward. Sunlight silhouettes the enemy as dark shapes, dozens of them. FW-190, as in BF-109GS, circling like hawks, waiting for the right moment to strike the bombers. These pilots are not amateurs. They have learned. They climb higher now. They dive faster. They refuse prolonged engagements. And today, they are ready. The German fighters roll in together, disciplined and aggressive. Cannon fire flashes among the bombers. AB-17 peels away trailing smoke. The escort reacts instantly. Boost now. Break them up, comes the order. Reynolds shoves the throttle forward. The Merlin responds violently, the aircraft lunging into the climb. He feels the familiar heat, the strain. The boost needle climbs past safety and keeps going. But this time, something is different. The FW-190 he targets does not flee immediately. Instead, it pitches up, meeting Reynolds head-on in the vertical. The German pilot commits, engine screaming just as hard, just as abused. For a split second, they are locked together, climbing into thinner air than either aircraft was meant to fight in. Reynolds realizes it at the same moment the enemy does. They are both overboosting. The Luftwaffe has learned. The German fighter rolls first, diving through Reynolds' path, guns flashing. Tracers snap past the Spitfire's canopy. Reynolds brakes hard, throttling back, letting gravity carry him down. His engine coughs once, angrily, then steadies. Below, the sky is chaos. Allied and German fighters intertwine in vertical spirals, climbs and dives far more aggressive than anything seen earlier in the war. Engines are being pushed to their limits on both sides, rules bent equally by necessity. The fight is shorter than expected. Both sides disengage early, conserving what machines they have left. The bombers continue, battered but intact. Back at base, the atmosphere is different from previous victories. Pilots speak less, listening more. Intelligence officers gather reports, asking pointed questions. "They climbed with you?" one asks Reynolds. "Yes," he answers. "Longer than before." "And stayed with you?" "For a while." That night, reconnaissance photos confirm it. German fighters have been modified. Not universally, not officially, but enough to matter. Field adjustments. Removed limiters. Emergency settings used more aggressively. The accidental advantage has become a contest of endurance. Engineers on both sides now face the same dilemma. More power wins fights. Less reliability loses wars. Somewhere between those truths lies survival. British maintenance crews notice rising engine failure rates. Not catastrophic explosions, but subtle degradation. Loss of compression. Burn valves. Fatigued components that no longer tolerate abuse. Aircraft are grounded more often. Spare engines are consumed faster than production prefers. The Air Ministry can no longer ignore it. A conference is held behind closed doors. Pilots, engineers, commanders. Charts are displayed. Losses compared. Victories weighed against material cost. The question is not whether the practice works. That is already proven. The question is how much it should be allowed to cost. A compromise emerges. Official emergency ratings are revised again. Fuel mixtures are adjusted. Maintenance intervals are shortened. The mistake is no longer a secret. It is now a managed risk. Reynolds notices the change immediately. Briefings become more precise. Time limits are enforced strictly. Ground crews inspect engines with new urgency, knowing exactly how close to failure each sortie pushes them. Across the channel, German pilots face the same reality, but with fewer resources. Their fuel quality suffers. Their replacement engines arrive late. Their margin is thinner. By late summer, the Luftwaffe begins pulling back from prolonged high-altitude interception. They still fight. They still inflict damage. But they no longer dominate the vertical space the way they once did. The skies feel different again. On a clear afternoon after a long escort mission, Reynolds lands and shuts down his engine, listening as the Merlin ticks and cools. He rests his helmet on the wing and looks at the aircraft, scarred, oil-streaked, but still alive. What began as a mistake has now reshaped tactics on both sides. It has forced adaptation, escalation, and compromise. It has shortened engine lives and lengthened pilot survival. The war continues to demand more. And it is not finished collecting the price of this advantage yet. The cost of power. August 1943. RAF Manston. The summer heat hangs heavy over the airfield, thick with the smell of fuel, oil, and scorched metal. Reynolds walks the dispersal line in silence, counting the gaps where aircraft should be. 3 Spitfires are grounded. One sits with its cowling removed, engine exposed like a wounded animal. The Merlin did not fail in combat. It failed on landing. The pilot made it back, but only just. Oil pressure collapsed on final approach. The engine seized moments after the wheels touched down. Mechanics found the damage later. Heat fatigue. Microfractures. A machine pushed one time too many. The mood among the ground crews has shifted. They work faster than ever, but the laughter is gone. Every engine inspection feels like defusing a bomb. Every pilot knows that survival in the air may simply postpone failure on the ground. Briefing that morning is blunt. Emergency boost saves lives. Emergency boost also kills engines. The question no one asks aloud is whether the trade remains acceptable. Reynolds listens as losses are read out. Not pilots. Engines. Aircraft written off due to wear rather than enemy action. Numbers that would have seemed unthinkable a year earlier are now routine. Still, the bombers keep flying. And they keep coming back in higher numbers than before. On the next escort mission, Reynolds sees the cost from the other side. A German fighter peels away early, engine trailing smoke, not from damage but from overstress. Another never shows up at all. Intelligence later confirms mechanical failure before contact. The advantage is no longer just speed or climb. It is sustainability. British industry adapts. Improved alloys enter production. Better cooling practices are introduced. Maintenance crews become experts in squeezing maximum life from engines that live constantly on the edge. German industry cannot match the pace. Reynolds feels it in the air. Enemy formations are smaller. Their attacks less coordinated. The Luftwaffe still fights hard, but with fewer machines capable of matching the abuse. In September, Reynolds is promoted. He now flies less, briefs more. He watches younger pilots make the same decisions he once did. He stresses discipline relentlessly. Power doesn't make you brave, he tells them. Judgment keeps you alive. One afternoon, a young pilot asks him quietly, "Sir, do you think it was worth it?" Reynolds does not answer immediately. He thinks of the mechanic's mistake, of the first surge of impossible acceleration, of friends who made it home because of that power, of aircraft that never flew again because engines gave out. "Yes," he says finally, "but only because we learned when to stop." By late 1943, the emergency boost practice is fully institutionalized. Manuals reflect it. Training assumes it. What began as an accident is now embedded into Allied air combat philosophy. The war grinds on toward its next phase. Reynolds stands on the edge of the field one evening as the sun sets behind returning aircraft. He watches the Spitfires land, engines hot, scarred, and exhausted, just like the men who fly them. They shut down one by one, ticking and cooling. Each one has lived a little shorter than it should have. But more pilots have lived longer than they otherwise would. The balance has been struck. The legacy of an accident. December 1943. RAF Biggin Hill again. The winter has returned, colder and harsher than the last. Frost rims the dispersal, and breath fogs the air as Reynolds walks past rows of aircraft, many bearing new scars, many carrying engines that will never see another spring. The war has moved forward, but its echoes linger here. Reynolds no longer flies combat sorties regularly. His hands still know the controls, but his role has changed. He now watches others take off into the gray sky, knowing exactly what they will ask of their machines when the moment comes. Inside a briefing room, a new generation of pilots listens as instructors describe emergency power use with calm authority. There is no mystery in it now, no rumor, no whispered advantage. It is simply part of how air combat is fought. The origin is never mentioned. Not the rushed maintenance shift. Not the misaligned component. Not the moment when a boost needle went too far and did not come back. History prefers clean narratives. Innovation. Design. Intent. Reality is Messier. Reynolds visits the maintenance hangar that afternoon. Corporal Hale is still there, older now, his hands permanently stained. They exchange a nod. Nothing more. No medals were ever awarded for that mistake. No official recognition given. And yet, its impact is everywhere. Across Europe, Allied fighters now fly with engines designed explicitly to tolerate abuse. New models incorporate lessons learned under fire. Safety margins are redefined, not by engineers alone, but by combat necessity. The Luftwaffe never fully recovers its balance. Shortages deepen. Reliability suffers. Pilots are forced to choose between performance and survival, often losing both. By the time the Allies gain clear air superiority in 1944, the outcome is no longer in doubt. The skies belong to those who learned fastest, adapted hardest, and accepted risk when it mattered. Reynolds reflects on it one evening as he watches the sunset bleed across the clouds. He thinks about how wars are not won only by grand strategies or brilliant designs, but by countless small moments. A choice, a shortcut, a mistake. Most mistakes cost lives. This one saved them. It did not do so cleanly, or cheaply, or safely, but it changed the fight. Long after the war, engineers will write papers about overboosting, emergency ratings, and thermal tolerance. Pilots will train with procedures that feel deliberate and precise. Museums will display engines that look ordinary to the untrained eye. Few will know that one of the most decisive advantages in the air began with something as simple as a mechanic doing his best under impossible pressure. Reynolds turns away from the window as the last aircraft lands. The engine coughs, then settles. Another machine brought back to earth by judgment, timing, and just enough restraint. In war, perfection is rare. Adaptation is everything.